There he is, got him. Nice. Ooh, that's a big bluegill, look at that. That's a dandy. So recently I did a video using my Garmin Striker Castable through the ice, and people wanted a direct comparison with a traditional ice fishing sonar. So I've got my Humminbird Helix out here. This is G4 in ice mode, and I'm going to catch a few fish on it in the same spot. I tried running these both together and immediately ran into my first problem, and that is while the Humminbird Helix has the ability to alternate its frequencies to filter out competing frequencies, the Striker does not, and so it gets very noisy if I run them at the same time on the Striker. So I will show you what that noise looked like. But yeah, so if it's not something you want to use right next to somebody else who's running a transducer, but I do want to show you the differences in how these look when targeting panfish and, you know, around 10 foot of water. So let's catch another 1 or 2 fish on the Helix, and then we will transition to the Striker. Oh, here comes another fish. It's a bit of a David versus Goliath kind of thing, because the Helix is a $1,000 unit, whereas the Striker is only about 180 bucks. There's a big fish looking at it. A couple fish here. Ooh, got him. Oh, that's a nice perch. I will be keeping him. And it's also David versus Goliath in terms of weight. So the Striker weighs about 2.5 ounces. The Helix, running a 12 amp hour lithium battery, weighs 8 pounds. So it's many times heavier. Something chasing it on the way down. Let's see what that is. Is it a trout or? So this is a weedy bottom. It's a soft bottom. You can tell on the Helix there, because it's got a lot of rich yellows and greens and oranges. The red is the hard bottom. Here comes the contestant. There he is, got him. That's a perch. Oop. If I can get him. Surprisingly, there's a lot these two units have in common. Obviously, they both have sonar. They both have GPS. They both have mapping features. They call that quick draw in the Garmin's, and they call it auto chart live on the Helix. But they both can do the same thing. So that's pretty amazing. Here comes a fish. Always come. Oh. But they do have some really dramatic differences in terms of their ability on sonar. So the Helix has a chirp ice fishing transducer, so that should, in theory, give you a little bit better signal, especially on small targets at depth. Oh, here's fish. Oh yeah, got him. I think that difference in, oh, that's a big old bluegill. The difference in the max depth range is reflected in those more variable frequencies. The Helix has a max depth range of 400 foot, where it's only 200 foot on the Striker Castable. And there's more variability in the frequency ranges available on the Helix as well. So I think its range is somewhere around like 28 to 270 in terms of the different frequencies, and it has a couple different chirp settings within there, which are going to allow you to filter out competing transducer signals, but also optimize for the conditions that you're in and for the size of the target that you're fishing. Whereas the Striker just has basically two settings, a narrow cone and a wide cone at 455 and 260 hertz frequencies, not chirp. Oh, there's fish coming in. Oh, we just got him. Another tiger fest out here. Okay, so we've seen the Helix in action. Let's go ahead and pop the Striker down there in the water and see how it looks when fishing for these panfish in shallows. So I've got that right here, this little baseball sized device, and I'm just going to attach it to this ram mount grip here and go and get screen recording started. And we'll just turn on the app and turn off the sonar on the Helix. Pull it out. Okay. Go and put the Garmin in there. Okay, so there we go. There's the bottom. It's a little bit messy right now. Hopefully that will clear up, but we can adjust it. And you can see my jig going down really nice. You can see the bottom structure looks basically the same. We've got that a couple feet of lighter vegetation on the bottom there. I'll say one thing that I've noticed with the Striker is that it does struggle a little bit more in terms of, is that a fish up here, up higher? See? Or is that just something falling? I think that's just something falling. Okay. Oh, yeah, my bait came off. Yeah, you can see my bait falling down there. My bait came off. One thing that I noticed with the Garmin, the Castable Striker, is that it does struggle a little bit more with bottom acquisition and holding on to it. And so oftentimes I'll end up manually adjusting to the depth that I'm at so that I can make greater use of the screen. That's pretty easy to do here, so I'll just go up here and manually adjust the range to there we go. That works for me. And like I said, it has two different settings in terms of the frequency. I prefer the 455 kilohertz, although you can do 260 as well. But see, the 260, you can't really see the jig as well because it's a wider cone. But the narrower 455 cone is really good. It's definitely more cluttered up at the top, and that's because the transducer is floating rather than being dropped down below the edge of the ice. So you can see that top, foot and a half, 2 foot of the cone is pretty dirty. That's to be expected. The transducer is kind of floating on the edge of the ice hole. It's very slushy here, so it can actually go up over the top of the ice. That's one of the challenges with this, is going to be keeping it directly centered over your hole as it free floats. There's fish. Got him. Oh, lost him. That sucks. That felt like a good perch. A little bit smaller target, but I'm sure we won't have any problem marking it. Yeah, you can see it going down. That's good. And you can see that hard bottom at 10 with a sort of weedy matrix between 8 and 10. If you drop the jig down into the weed beds, you can still kind of see it in there, but it's a little bit more challenging. There's a fish. We got him. Got him. There we go, another perch. I saw him come up through that weed bed. Now, there are a couple nice things about this free-floating transducer with the Strikers, that you can reposition it pretty easily within the hole just by moving around with your fingers. It will kind of float a little bit, but I'm surprised it actually does a pretty good job staying in place unless it's windy. But if you're inside of an ice shelter or something, it's not that big of a deal. But I like that I can reposition it to get a little bit different view down there. And just by moving it a little bit, sometimes I can see the jig moving down into the weeds a little better. I can pick up the lure a little better. I find that actually works better than trying to tinker with the gain so much. It's just kind of moving your transducer around. You can even just use the tip of your rod to move it, which is kind of nice. And you can absolutely tether it too. So if you want to hold it in a position, they include a little tether with it. You could clip onto it with like a duo lock, and then you can just lay that out to one side and press it into the snow or ice, tie it off. So if you want your transducer to stay in a specific location, it can do that. Oh, there's fish right there coming up looking at it. Go. Get him. Oh yeah, it's a perch. And so I opt not to tether my Garmin because I think one of the great advantages of it is that, like you saw, I just pulled that fish up. I didn't have to worry about reaching down and grabbing a transducer and pulling it out of the water because there's no wires on or cables to the transducer. That's, to me, is I think one of the best selling points about the Garmin is that no more tangled fish on your transducer cords results in less lost fish. Oh, there's fish. This looks like a trout the way it came running in. Nope. Let's get back down there. I'm still down there. Still looking at it. Got him. Ooh, feels like a nice fish. Ooh, really pretty tiger. That's a pretty tiger. All the tigers I've caught today have been really... I hate slush. There you go. Really pretty tiger. Nice and gold and brown. There you go, buddy. Turn around. There you go. So like I said, this is really a bit of a David and Goliath comparison, but if we run down sort of the basic overviews of these two sonar units, obviously in terms of cost, the Striker is substantially easier on the wallet at sub $200, and I think the non-GPS version is like closer to just $100. For me, the GPS version is helpful if the lakes are mapped, but a lot of the lakes aren't mapped where I live here in the West. There's a lot of Eastern bias in all of these companies' mapping potential. And the same thing is true with my Helix. I have Lake Master, and most of the maps and most of the lakes I fish aren't actually mapped, so they don't do me a whole lot of good. Both of them have that auto mapping feature, though. Auto Chart Live on the Helix and quick contours on the Garmin. In terms of portability, the Striker is definitely a big winner in this. I mean, just something the size of a baseball that weighs a couple ounces is pretty remarkable, especially for somebody like me who tends to hike long distances on the ice. You know, that shuttle that I have from the Helix is nice and offers a lot of add-on features, most of which I don't use because I really just want basic sonar. And it weighs 8 pounds. That's with a 12 amp hour battery, which is going to give me, you know, roughly 18 to 20 hours on the water. So the battery life is substantially better on the Helix. The Garmin, they say, has, you know, an 8-hour battery life. I find that it's actually closer to 6 during these colder temperatures. But then it also impacts your phone's battery longevity, so you may have to pack a separate power bank or small USB power bank to keep your phone topped off. I've got a newer iPhone, so I'm not having any battery issues, but if I had my old Pixel 6 out here, I would be I'd be really struggling with battery, I know. So it's going to depend on your phone's battery potential and how old your phone is, but it will gobble up your phone's battery power. There's fish. He's looking at it. He's looking at it. All over it, just staring at it. Not biting it though. Didn't want it. Just stared at it for a long time. I bet you it was a bass. You know how bass act. Come in and look at it. There he is, got him. Oh geez, I think that was a bass. Judging by how big that thing was. Or is it a big trout? I guess we'll find out here. Came in and looked at it forever. What do we got here? Oh yeah, that's a big bass. That's what I figured it was. That's funny. There you go. That's awesome. What a cool way to end today's trip out in the water. I'll put links to a more in-depth view of just the Garmin itself and its features and settings that I use. But you can see it works really well, especially in sub 15 foot of water for panfish, as well as trout and some big old bass. All right, guys, I'll see you next time out in the water. Just remember, fish smarter, not harder. Bye, guys.